today's Dow action, specifically pointing out the Dow because it points to a market that is actually down today, but it just comes off the first historic three-day rally for the average. But where are we headed next? And people have been worrying about the 401ks and all of the moves. You've seen a lot of money come out of yours. Is now, after those 3 great days, is now your 401 A-OK? Joining us now to talk about the markets is a guy who's a real expert in all of that. Lee Munson, Chief Investment Officer, Portfolio Wealth Advisors, and Glenn Hechler. He's the 401k genius here, Senior Investment Strategist at National Securities. To you, Glenn, is my 401 A-OK better, at least, after these 3 great days?
Absolutely. You know, the one thing I always tell 401k investors is this: the true advantage of a 401k, besides pre-tax investing or tax deferral growth, is the ability to continue to dollar cost average the market. And if you stick to that plan and have the ability to continue to buy the market on a monthly basis, it doesn't really matter what the market does on a month-to-month. As long as you have a long-term strategy and your plan is to own in your 401k over the next 5 to 10 years, obviously last week and what's happened the last couple of days have been great, but if you stick to the plan, I think you'll be fine anyway.
You're better anyway to catch the upside moves instead of just going to cash and being frightened, right, Lee? And there's always a great stock buy or two to make, even in tough times.
Well, there is, and you remember, it's all about cash flow and valuations. Hey, I agree with what Glenn saying, dollar cost averaging is great, but we also have to get a little bit more pragmatic. When do we rebalance? When are we putting those dollars in? So last Thursday, when we had extreme fear on the VIX, we were down multi-year lows, and we got those headlines saying 20% down, that's when you want to attack and you want to buy, not just the first of the month because it's automated. You know, look at places like international value. In your 401k, you might have these mutual funds. Look at something in the international area, and it has the word value on it. Remember, statistically, Liz, growth stocks don't do as well as undervalued cheap stocks. We call them value. Everybody loves to hear the word growth. But in international value right now, you can get a dividend yield almost a point higher than the S&P, and a valuation, a price-earning multiple, 30, 40, 50% less than the S&P 500. So, and the S&P's cheap right now. Same thing with Disney. If you want to take a large U.S. growth stock, I don't want to get LinkedIn down 40%. I don't want to be tweeted on Twitter down 50, 60, 70%. But look at something like a Disney. It has a PE of 17. Yeah, it's a little rich, but it's not as rich as some of these things trading at 20, 30, 40% multiples to have the ability to get cut in half. And if you want to speculate, if you're young, you want to swing for the fences, or you just want to get the thing with the juice, look at a broad-based emerging market index. You're getting higher dividend yield than the S&P 500.
Can we put up those names? I'd really love to see those emerging market names. And as we do, let me take it to Glenn. Glenn, can you do that? Can you do what Lee has just talked about, and this time your inputs into the 401ks? Does it go by your paycheck, and is that a little dangerous anyway?
It does. One thing you have to talk about is, you're talking about a little bit about the investor. Unfortunately, when the market's hitting all-time lows, hitting historical lows, or you're starting to see a correction that you haven't seen before, it's very hard for those investors just to say, oh, it's time for me to put money in. That's when they're really scared. So when you have investing in a 401k, unfortunately, you have a limit of choices what you potentially could put your money inside the 401k. So, to me, it's one of the things that I always tell people is, look, if your time horizon's 5, 10 years, stay the course, continue to balance the right way.
We got to go because we're coming up against the closing bell.